Kevin said, got it. I am Sean Bryant. I've been doing this work of early childhood and family services for over 30 years now. I lived in the Bay Area for 20 years. I largely have two roles now. I'm the director of Yes to ECE, a consultancy, and my other dual role is I'm the director of professional development and adult learning at the Child Lab, which is at Yale University. And that role really, my Yes to ECE role is I'm usually around the country somewhere, either virtually or in person, providing training, coaching, and consultation around everything involving young children and the adults who care and educate them. And one of those specific things that I have a passion for is fathers, under that umbrella of family center practices. What you see on the screen now is just some things about me, some roles I've had, not all the roles, but things that I find important in this work of changing the lives of our youngest citizens, young children, and the adults who care and educate them in different places and spaces and settings. And as you can see, that third bullet down, I lean towards family-centered practices with a laser focus on fathers, because so much of the work in this country, when we think of children, we talk about this notion of child-centered practices. And the danger of doing that is we remove fathers and mothers from the equation and only want to consider the child. But I like to say you can't do anything within the child without considering the context and conditions through which they show up. And I juxtapose that with you can't do anything with the father without fundamentally understanding the context and conditions through which they show up in the lens through which you decide to see them. So neuroscience would say your perspective is your reality, or your perception is your reality, I'd like to say. Meaning what you tell yourself about fathers becomes how you see fathers, regardless of what's really happening in their lives. And that's the danger of this work, that if we don't unpack who we are and how we showed up, we bring it to the work and we collapse it on fathers, regardless of who they are or what they're working on. So just hold that in mind as we move forward throughout our, what I like to call a learning journey today. I just came from a meeting earlier, and the woman in the meeting, I had said some strong things, and then she was like, I feel like you're putting your credentials on the table, Sean. And in some respect I was, but in another respect, I was really saying, this is what brings me to the work in 30 years. So I just like to share with everybody the two books that are out there in the world. The first one is Trauma Responsive Family Engagement in Early Childhood. The Father's Core is actually in chapter 9 in this book. Chapter 9 is all about the Alameda County Father's Core. So when we think of trauma responsive family engagement, what Kevin and Noah and them are doing over the last decade is actually resourced in this book. Now, don't talk to Kevin about it because he might have some strong feelings about it. The other book is Trauma Informed Practices for Early Childhood Educators, which is our newer book, where I'm also an author. Just trauma in families in the children. The other special part that I like to disclose is that none of these books put $1 in my pocket. For every single book we donate, we find an agency. It could be your agency with the next book throughout the United States, and we donate all the proceeds. So all the proceeds from Trauma Responsive Family Engagement, that means every quarter, Parent Voices Oakland receives a check from the selling of the book. And Trauma Informed Practices, there's a program in New Orleans called, this is the second edition, Little Warriors. They receive all the proceeds, and there's a program in New York that receives all the royalties from the first edition. So who knows? It could be where you work. And of course, I'm on social media at Yes to ECE, doing things. So let's talk about this learning process. In this learning process, my hope is to raise awareness about fathering styles and how dads parent. Hopefully you'll be able to learn some new skills and reflect on those new skills. Because we're not together all day and we can't do too much, we're going to do some processing work together in some breakout spaces but use that time to reflect and share out your experience, your knowledge, and how you're working with fathers, or what you're learning about fathers, because I don't know everyone's respective roles. So there's some core strategies I want you to keep in mind in our work today to anchor as you move forward. So the first strategy is that when dads look in this metaphorical mirror here as a core theme, when dads look into this mirror, regardless of who you're servicing and why you're servicing them. I know years ago, it was probably about 27 years ago, I was working in San Francisco, and we had a grant. And my job as the coordinator was to go throughout San Francisco and find all these fathers who weren't paying child support and try to get them in our fathering program, and help them get jobs so that they can then pay child support. Very interesting role that I had for a period of time there. But one of the themes that was kind of packed under everything in our work was we wanted dads to look in the mirror, but when they looked in the mirror that we were holding up, we wanted them to see the best of them. We wanted them to see their strengths. We wanted them to know what their core capacities were, despite their challenges in parenting or being a father or being in relationship or not being in relationship with the other co-parent, regardless of their role in terms of being able to pay all of the child support or not. We wanted them to figure out, what are my capacities, what are my strengths, and then how do I stand on those strengths to move forward. So I want to encourage everyone as we move forward to use that as a strategy to guide us forward. So you're going to need something to write with. We're going to take a short quiz. You don't have to worry about reading. I'm going to read for you. So I want you to think about that father or that dad that I asked you to hold in mind earlier. Okay? So I want you to answer these questions through your perspective, knowing that it may not be 100% correct, but it's your perspective on that father in their fathering style. So all you're going to do is write down the number of at least 5 statements that you believe are most like their dad. So there are a series of slides that are going to come up. There are about 4 slides, and they all have numbers. So the statement that I read that you believe is most like that dad that you're holding in mind, write down those numbers off of each slide. All right, here we go. When you consider that dad, or if you're a dad, this dad would rather have no rules than to worry about breaking them. That's a 1. Number 2, this dad believes that his children will obey him and not talk back. Number 3, this dad thinks that his kids are way too hard for him to figure out. It tires him to even try to figure them out. Number 4, this dad believes that his children can get along pretty well if he stays out of their way. Number 5, this dad believes that his children should be given choices. So that was 5 statements. So you should have on a piece of paper one of those numbers, or maybe 2 of those numbers, but there are more. I'm going to move to the next slide. Remember, you're only writing down the number and holding in mind that dad that you're thinking about. This dad thinks that his work and his home responsibilities are too stressful. He can't worry about what his kids are doing all the time. That's a number 6. Number 7, this dad says, I was spanked when I was a child, and he believes that he turns out okay. I love this one, because when people say that to me all the time, I often say, are you sure? And then they question themselves. Are you sure? Are you sure? Number 8, this dad says that my children can get themselves up and put themselves to bed. They don't need me to adult on them. I love that one. So I took the slide out with me and my godchildren, who are all in Oakland. There's an 11-year-old who will be 12 the 19th of this month, one that just turned 9 a week and a half ago, and one that's turning 6 in December. And their parents are the quintessential Number 8, their parents are, but not their godfather. Uh, I come visit and the kids are kind of walking around. I'm thinking, it's 9:30. They have to go to school tomorrow. And they say, oh, we'll just let them fall asleep on their own. At first I tried to sit with it. Then I said, I can't do this. I said, okay, everybody get out the living room. Everybody go in your bed, get in your rooms, go in your beds, cut the lights off. Good night. And then the baby was like, read me a book. So I read her a book. Then they all tried that. No, we're going to bed. I'm not talking right now. We're going to bed. Guess what? They all went to sleep in 5 minutes. So then Jonathan and Tiffany says, can you come back tomorrow? No, I will not. You've got to work on your parenting styles. Your young children should not be roaming the house tired at 10 o'clock, but they're really permissive parents. And the godfather isn't. Number 9, this dad says, my children won't listen to me. I can't spank them or I might get in trouble. So I just quit trying. That's a number 9. Number 10, this dad says, sometimes when my children talk, they make tons of sense. So I try to listen to them. I was going to tell them a story about number 9, Noah, but I think I'll move forward. About my cousin and my aunt years ago. Should I tell it, Noah?
I think you should tell it.
All right. So this story, I've been alive for like half a century now and a little bit more. So folk who are from, who grew up in the 60s and the 70s like I did, things were different. They were different. So I have a first cousin. My aunt had 3 daughters, and she was a single mom at the time. She was working, and her middle daughter, so her eldest daughter, we're the same age, but her middle daughter decided after school to not come home, right? So they didn't realize, like, their aunt, when I let my mother tell it, she was the wild one. So she knows how to like run the streets. So she would call from work and she would want to talk to everybody on the phone, because you can't say, oh, she's here, she's upstairs. She know your sister's going to protect you. She needed to speak to everybody. So Carmela, who's my age, said, Jamila's not here, because she couldn't put her on the phone. So my aunt said, okay, she hung up the phone. And when she got home, she spanked Jamila. Jamila went back to school the next day, and they happened to be more lighter skinned Black. My family is very diverse in terms of skin tones. So Jamila went to middle school, and she says, "Look what my mother did. She spanked me, and she put this mark on my arm."
Motion detected at the something.
They pulled her out of class, and DHS worker brought her home, and they were sitting in the car. So my crazy aunt calls and says, I want to talk to everybody. So Carmela says, Jamila's here, but she's outside with the lady. And she said, when we came in, they came to the porch. And my aunt said, don't let them in the house. So my aunt gets home, Noah, and she invites her daughter in and the woman in, and, they give her back to her because my aunt had to go to court. And she literally told the judge, she says, I'm a single mom. And if I can't spank her when she doesn't listen to me, then you all need to keep her. And the judge sent my cousin home. This was years ago, Noah. This wouldn't happen today. He said, go home. Your mother's working hard. Go home. Lady, take her home. So when the DHS worker was leaving, she told Jamila, take this quarter. If your mother spanks you again, call me. And my aunt says in front of the worker, if you take that coin, you're going to have to leave with her. Imagine this happening today, Noah. So this one, number 8, this dad says, my children won't listen to me. I can't spank them, so I have to quit trying. What this really gets at is this notion that spanking is the only option. So what we know is that dads and mothers actually spank when they don't feel like they have other tools in their toolbox. So the work of those of us who support them is really to tell my aunt, how can we put more tools in your toolbox? Her daughters are all grown now, but she felt like that was the only resource as a single mom. So this dad is saying, that's the only thing I know. I don't know anything. So for me, it's, how do I hear someone who says, a dad who says, I spank my children or I pop my children, without saying, that's awful, you're a horrible father. I've shifted over the years, Noah. Now, and I say, tell me about that. When do you feel like you spank your child? What happens before? What happens after? I get them to talk about it, because in talking about it, I'm not just meeting them where they are, but I'm hearing their full story. And then I can say, I heard you, I understand that. Can I share some of my story now? And what usually happens is dads are telling me, you know what? I'm actually talking to my children more. Or I figured out, I asked them to breathe with me. Or I'll say, you know what?
Motion
We
detected.
can't, Alexa, stop. I'm sorry, Noah. I forgot to cut it off. Uh, I'm talking to my children more. I'm asking for space. They're using words and not physical violence as a way to parent. So number 9 just jumps out at me every single time because it's one that I interface with oftentimes with parents. Let's move forward. Number 11. And I want to encourage everybody. I know we jumped right in really strong after Kevin introduced me, but I want to encourage everyone to put their questions, their comments, even their reactions to what they're hearing, what they're experiencing in the chat. Like share it with us all. So as we're going through these, I'm encouraging you all to put it in the chat or to unmute and say, hold on, Sean, I have to say something, so that it is not just my voice and it doesn't feel so transactional, that we're building, even on Zoom, what we like to call some type of learning community in this short time that we're together. All right. So you're going to write down a number 11, holding in mind that dad you're thinking about. This dad said, my children should do as I say until they are old enough to make their own decisions. That's an 11. Number 12, you're writing down 12 if the dad you're holding in mind says, although it takes hard work, parents and children should try to talk about their feelings and make family decisions. Number 13 says, when my children don't mind me or listen to me, I yell at them and I threaten them with punishment. Number 14 says, I am not good at what? Parenting. This dad says, it is easier to let my ex take care of the kids and for me not to what? See them.
Motion detected if the something's here.
Children, number 15, should be allowed to be individuals. Children should be allowed to be individuals. That sounds different than what I heard a lot of times, Noah. I heard growing up, children should be seen and not heard. Have you ever heard that one? Meaning that children should be quiet and in the background and not listened to at all. This person is,
I heard that a lot. I had a older father who we were second family, so he was super old school, super traditional, never spared the rod. So a lot of these things are taking me back to my own childhood.
Yeah, that's exactly what I came up with. You don't speak up, you don't say nothing, not heard.
Yeah. And what are the implications of that? That's always my question. When children don't have voice and choice, regardless of who they are and where they are, what are the implications? What does that mean to us as we grow up and become adolescents? What aspects of that do we take into adulthood? And then definitely what aspects of that do we take into our own parenting or our own adulting if we parent children or if we're the adult involved in the lives of other children?
Yeah, I think also, I think this is part of this is some of the outrage that we feel and see towards younger kids and young folks who have a voice or want to use their voice because they're told now, especially in school, especially with our social emotional learning, like you are an individual, you have a voice, you have choice, and sometimes it's really difficult to get that through to the parents. They're like, no, that I have all these, this is what we do at home. Now they're pushing back, and it's like, well, there's different ways. Like the way that you were raised doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way moving forward, especially with science and everything. So we talking back was a sign of disrespect for me growing up, says Patricia. Absolutely.
That's right. For many people. And I think, Noah, when we think of this kind of broad umbrella, I know we're honing in and spotlighting on fathers, But traditionally in this country for 150 years, we actually, I like to say, if we took a brown paper bag and just put a bunch of popcorn in it and, shook it up, that's exactly what we've done to families, parents in this country. Initially, we told parents, bring your children, I'm thinking specifically of schooling, bring your children to school because you're too ignorant to teach them. And the people who taught them were religious leaders because they said, you all are morally, inept. So we have to teach your children. And that was only certain children. It wasn't everybody. Then as, when we begin to say, I'm jumping some years now, that all people should be afforded some level of education, even if it's not equal. So inequality persists. But we told parents, bring your children, but you need to teach them morality. Morality is actually oftentimes juxtaposed with social and emotional learning, Noah. And we forget this part. So what we were saying was we're going to teach them literacy, we're going to teach them math, we're going to teach them to read and write. But you must teach them how to be a good citizen. But are you a good citizen? Then they said, you know what? You aren't good citizens, you're ignorant parents. So bring your children to school and we'll teach them everything. Actually, we need you to stay a little while so that we can teach you some things too, specific to who we need you to be. Then we said, oh, the parents are asking too many questions. You know what? Just drop your child off. I've jumped about, another 80 years now, Noah.
Yeah.
Just drop your child off in the drop-off line and go away, log on to Class Dojo and pick them up on time and we won't have a problem. So this, that ping pong that we've done with parents and families, that what we often don't talk about is, this is where the uptick in the disagreement around social emotional learning comes from. That it's really politicized because it's attached to morality from the beginning. And some of that is still persisted. We've changed the language. What we're really saying is people believe when we teach social emotional learning that it's not a domain of learning. And it is, just like math and literacy and science are domains of learning, so is social emotional learning. But that's the one we pushed aside because we've attached it to morality. So you made me get off topic there, Noah, but this pertains to parenting and to fathers, because when they show up in whatever capacity we're servicing them, that's what's coming up for us when we perceive them differently. And that's what's surfacing for them when they're saying, this is who I believe Noah is, or this is who I believe Noah is not. It's all under there. It's all under there. Our final five. Number 16, this father says, my children should realize that my work is stressful and that I am tired at the end of the day. You're going to write down number 17 if this is one of the things the father you're thinking about is saying. This father says, technology is a lifesaver. It keeps my children out of my way. Number 18, this father says, I expect my children to conform to my decisions without discussion. Number 19, I do not criticize my children or call them names, even when I can't understand what they are doing. Number 20, this is the last one. This father says, my parents are better with my kids. If they watch them, I can go out and be happy. All right. So everybody should have written down at least 5 numbers when thinking about that father that you were thinking of. It could be your father, it could be your spouse, your partner. It could be a father you work with. I don't need you to tell me who he is, but holding in mind the 5 that came out when you were thinking of that father. On our next screen, I want you to consider your 5 numbers. Let's start using the chat box. I want everybody to use the chat box or unmute and just put the style that most represents the father that you were thinking about. Not their name, just in the chat box, the one that pops up. Do your numbers equate to jellyfish, invisible, enforcer, or brick wall?
Morning.
Good morning, Tashina. Uh-oh, she unmuted. Okay, she muted herself. No, we heard you say good morning. All right, Jasmine says enforce a brick wall. Okay, thank you, Jasmine. Oh, Jose says enforce a brick wall. Mm-hmm.
My numbers as well.
Wow. Lots of 2s, 7s, 11s, 13s, and 18s. Well, Matthew says backbone communicating. Okay. Adrena said visible. Enforce a brick wall.
I went with backbone communicating.
Okay, Samuel.
Yeah.
Enforcer. Wow. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Joanne from Family Justice Center says invisible. Let's take it a step deeper. For those who are sharing in the chat, Carlisle says mix. What is the mix, Carlisle? Without sharing any personal information, is this a father you work with that you're thinking of when you're thinking of the parenting, the fathering style that those numbers equated to? So a few people share it in the chat for us. Oh, Adrena said my child's father. Okay, Adrena, thank you. Noah said my pops. Okay.
I'm actually thinking about my son.
Okay.
Samuel.
Your son and how you thought of your son in terms of answering these numbers, not how your son would
How he parents.
as he's parenting.
Yes.
Okay, not how he
parents.
not how he thought you parented. Okay.
No,
Right,
the way
right.
he parents. Yeah.
Okay. Patricia said backbone communicating her own. Okay. Thank you. Wow. All right, let's keep going. So now that we have these 4 kind of styles, or some people call them types, I like the word style. Let's look at what represents some characteristics, some ways of being, some habits of mind that these fathers kind of demonstrate and hold. So let's start with the communicating backbone father. Historically, we call these fathers what? Authoritative, because they were nurturing and reasonable. They tend to set high standards with clear expectations. Dr. Lisa Delpit says they're warm demanders. There's this sense of warmth, but you understand the demand. So the researchers say that children with these types of communicating backbone fathers tend to be self-disciplined, and they tend to think for themselves. So what we unpack here is that dads who can communicate and have a backbone, the benefit that their children walk away with is they actually get lots of self-discipline and they're able to think for themselves. This particular style out of the 4 is found to be the what? Most beneficial to children. These dads oftentimes have disciplinary rules that are clear, and they have reasons behind them. So their no isn't no because I said so. It's no, that's unsafe and you could hurt yourself and fall down. There's a rationale and reason behind it. And then when we think of these dads and how they communicate, we find that their communication is frequent. And these dads are scaffolding, meaning that they communicate appropriately to the child's level of understanding. So what we mean by that is you have a 5-year-old and you're calling them little man because you're actually talking to him the way we would talk to a 16-year-old. So the expectations are far beyond what this 5-year-old can do. And when this 5-year-old doesn't meet expectations, guess what happens? They're punished. They're punished. So if you look on the slide now, you think of the impact of all the things I just listed and what's on the screen, we find that children whose fathers parent this way largely walk away because they're emotionally stable, and they're healthy in terms of whole child. They're healthy mentally, physically, psychologically. They're healthy. So those are huge, huge benefits. So I want you all to do me a favor now. I know you all have one. I want you to grab your cell phone if you can. Grab your cell phone and open your cell phone to the calculator. Open it to the calculator. Because we just talked about this notion of these dads who are communicators and they have a backbone. Their communication is frequent and it's appropriate to the child's level of understanding, meaning they don't adult on children. They don't adult on children. So you have your cell phone out to the calculator. We're going to do some basic math here. And when you get the number, I want you to just put it in the chat. 365 times 2. 365 times 2. 365 times 2.
I did some fast math in my head. Okay. All right.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Crystal and Noah. It's 7:30. 365 times 27. All right, 9,855. Thank you, so Jose and Crystal. All right, 365 times 3. 365 times 3. 1,095. 365 times 38. 13,870. 365 times 4. 1,460. Crystal and Eric are fast at this, Noah.
Yes, they are.
365 times 49. 17,885. Did we do 365 times 4 already, Noah?
I don't know.
I don't think we did.
I don't think so,
365
yeah.
times 4. Yes, Carlisle said yes.
Oh,
So it's
yeah,
365
1460.
times 365 times 5. Thank you, Carlisle. $1,825. 365 times 55.
20,075.
That's right. That's right. So for anybody paying attention, what I just had you do is I had you think of, and you can use this with teenagers or other people, but because this is first 5, I had you consider the number of days that a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old have been alive. And if you paid attention to the math, it's all under 2,000 days. Then I had you add the number of days a 27-year-old, a 37-year-old, 40-something-year-old, and a 50-something-year-old have been alive. So these fathers who communicate and have a backbone realize that they've been alive more than 14,000 days. They've had 14,000 opportunities to do what they're asking their 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-old to do, where they've had, almost 20,000 opportunities to do what they're asking that young child or their teenager to do. So these fathers who are really honing in on how to communicate and to make it age appropriate, understand that if they don't, they adult on children. So that was just a visual representation of the numbers. So we can look at, this is the number of days that people have been alive. And they say that most of us won't be alive for more than like 30,000, days. So it depends on how close you are to that. I don't know, but that's what they say. but people always exceed that. But thinking about young children and their fathers who've had more experience, hopefully at least days alive, to master that. These fathers understand. So what if you're working with fathers who've been alive for 18,000 days, but they don't understand that their 4-year-old is different than their 14-year-old, and they talk to both of them the same way? See the problem there? They end up adulting oftentimes on those young children unknowingly. So when we see them in that context and conditions, instead of saying that's wrong, don't do that, how do we begin to lean in to work with them differently to build that resource if they don't have that communicating backbone style as a core strength? Let's move forward and look at enforcer brick wall fathers. So the communicating backbone fathers are authoritative. Enforcers are authoritarians. Authoritarian fathers is really synonymous with what? Disciplinarians. They're strict. There's little to no negotiation. Punishment is often very, very common. And communication is what? One way, from father to child. Rules are never explained. We find that fathers with this type of style are usually less nurturing. Expectations are really high with limited flexibility. Really, really high with limited flexibility. We find that young children who have these types of fathers end up with very poor social skills and competencies. They can develop into being antisocial young children or teens or adolescents. And they could develop insecurities when they've experienced this type of parenting style for far too long. Let's move to the third one, invisible fathers. Invisible fathers. Invisible fathers are what we call uninvolved fathers. Uninvolved fathers tend to give children what? A lot of freedom and generally stay out of their way. Sometimes these fathers are called the present but absent father. I'm physically present because I live in the same house with you, but I'm not socially and emotionally present at all. What we're finding is many fathers, we didn't notice for years, actually make a conscious decision to parent in this way. This part was shocking to me, Noah. While other fathers are less interested or unsure of what to do, we're finding more and more fathers are making a conscious decision to parent this way. This really means that they're not anchoring themselves in no particular what? Parenting style. It's all about what? The children can do mostly what they want to do when they want to do it. What we find is this is because of lack of information on fathering and parenting, and or, here it is, Noah, caring. So these fathers basically said, I didn't have any information. No one told me. I just didn't think I could figure it out. Or the lack of caring. They also found that communication was limited between them and the child, and oftentimes between them and the other parent.
Sean, can you elaborate on the lack of caring? Like, what does that mean in terms of caring about the parenthood, the child, the relationship, the outcomes? Like, what do you mean when you say caring?
Caring about the outcome, that, you know what, you can do what you want. I don't really care. It's all right if you go ahead and do it. That this parent might tell the child, you know what, you can stay up on your cell phone until you just fall asleep. That it could be not caring about the technology use and what blue light does to a young child or adolescent brain or even an adult brain, or this caring of, you could literally have rain over the house I'm here, the bills are paid, but you figure it out. You figure it out. Yeah.
So basically, it's like you learn right and wrong on your own.
That's a great way to bring that to being, Samuel.
Yeah.
For many of these fathers, that ultimately is what ends up happening in terms of their children, because they become what we used to say all the time, that they're parentified, that they're having to parent really early themselves. Which is why the impact here says they become really mature. These are the children that notice things. You know, they can sense threat before threat happens because they've been forced to care for themselves early and often. And oftentimes these children may appear very, very, very independent at a very young age, compared to other children who vacillate between coming from an interdependent family where they do things with children, opposed to for them when they're really little, and we do things together. And then as adults, we do things for ourselves, but still commune with our, families or communities. These young children, the maturity and the independence work together because the fathers are saying, that I paid the bill, the lights are on, but you're going to figure the rest of this out. I'm here, but I'm not here to guide you and to model and to role model. The thing about this is these fathers, Noah, aren't using discipline at all. And the conscious decision is because that I'm a parent this way. I'm gonna be here, but I'm not going to really involve myself because I'm giving them what I perceive to be freedom and staying out of that way. Oftentimes is related to two things: fear of failure, that if I involve myself deeply in the parenting, I might not be successful, right? The other one is a lack of a healthy role model. Lots of millennial parents are saying, I do not want to parent the way I was parented. And I often say, okay, tell me about that. Here's the catch. When they say that, we've got to engage them in what are you going to put in place of it? Invisible fathers are often saying, I'm not going to parent the way I was parented, but they don't replace it with anything. And invisible fathers have decided to not replace it with anything because they think all they had to do was not do the things that their dad or their mom or whoever raised them, their abuelita, their tio, whatever they did, they're saying, I'm not doing that. But that's not enough. That leaves a gap. And invisible fathers are really that gap, Noah, because they haven't said, I'm using any particular style of discipline around parenting, which is why it's ineffective. And I like to say even dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Has there been what are the outcomes when those fathers are met with disinformation and encouraged, to when you say, yes, you were parented a certain way and you say you're not going to bring that into for your own child, but you say that once you remove that and you don't replace it with anything, what are some of the outcomes for that? Like when fathers hear that, or when they hear that information, that just because you remove the style that you were raised on, but you don't replace it with something tangible or something that is beneficial to the child, are they receptive to that information? Those type of fathers, like the parenting style fathers.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat back what I think I heard, Noah. And then you correct me if I heard it correctly or incorrectly. So I think what you were saying was, well, two things we don't do. We don't say, well, I don't advise you saying, you can say what you want to say. I'm gonna say that part. Servicing fathers, that you are this type, which is why I'm using the word style, because our style can change. So I'm not pushing them into a corner saying, you are this. I think that's very, very important. Hearing their story and their narrative is very important, because what we're finding out is when we talk about our story and our narrative, it has a healing component psychologically. For a lot of fathers who've been wounded in childhood by their own fathers, and they've carried that into their own parenting and never sought help, or the help didn't look like them, didn't sound like them, didn't feel like them, they've rejected it because it didn't show up as help. It showed up as just another threat, right? So if that's all I'm carrying into the situation when I show up to work with Dara and she's saying she's my caseworker and she wants to help me, but if I perceive Dara, and I'm using Noah and Dara because I'm familiar with both of them, everyone. So I'm putting them on the spot because they know me. That if she shows up saying that she's here to help, but everything she's doing puts me on high alert.
Mhm.
I'm going back to saying I need to do what's safe. So we show up to support these fathers by hearing their narrative, letting them talk about it, hearing them say, I'm not doing these 3 things, right? That my dad did or how I was parented. Awesome. Then we slowly bring them to when your child does that, if your child skips school, what would you like to do? It could start with a hope or a wish that may be beyond my capacity. You know, what would you like to do? So they've got to get to that point of my child skipped school, that's on them. They've got to move to, oh, if my child skipped school, here's what I would like to do, or here's what I do now. And we're filling that gap. We're getting them closer together. Here's what I do now. Here's what I would like to do. As they begin to move forward in that, they close that. So that's the response to an invisible father, getting them to articulate why the gap exists in the way that it does. And them simply saying, as the starting place, this is what I would like to do. And us acknowledging that if they could do it on their own, they would do it. Here's, I think, the really important piece here, Noah, that so often, Dara shows up as my caseworker, and we create these great goals and plans, and then I don't meet any of them because the reality is I am right now as a parent incapable of doing those things on my own. She's saying she's a resource. She's getting me to say them, but we have no mechanism put in place for me to do that. So if my goal is my child keeps skipping school and I don't want them to skip school, I have to go to work. I yell at, Sean Jr. and tell him he can't skip school. 9th grade is important. It's the first year of high school. And I'm just depleting myself, raising my voice. And I've never raised my voice before because I'm pretty absent. But now Dara's telling me I need to do something. So I'm stressed because I'm worried about what Dara's going to say. So I'm using the behavior that I don't even use that's stressing me, ineffective. But if then she resources and says, hey, we actually know children skip school because they feel like they want to be connected, it's a way for, them to connect to other kids. Oftentimes they may be shy or withdrawn, or they're the bully, or they're being bullied. So then we help the father understand that and rethink it around, hey, maybe spend more one-on-one time with your child. What's the one thing that you could do with your child today like doing? They may say, my kid loves Netflix. All the new movies that come out on Friday, could you give your son an hour and a half of just you and him Netflixing together? Those are all the cures, Noah, that oftentimes is things that cost no money. Mm-hmm. We like to say in the science, time and attention is the best cure for most things. And what most of us don't want to give is time and attention, because traditionally we've been told that time and attention will spoil children. But I had a very wise maternal grandmother who used to say, milk spoils, not children. Mm. So if we can change that mindset, that time and attention from a father to a child or children is the cure and not the curse, because too many of us believe that it's the curse. And that's a very old way of seeing things. We can bring all of these fathers, the enforcer, the invisible father, and the next one, the jellyfish, to resource themselves as part of it. But part of that is they're having to do dual work at the same time. They've got to believe in their own capacities. They've got to believe that it's capable. They got to see themselves as the resource, so that Dara is holding up that mirror for me. Mm. But when she puts the mirror down and starts doing like this and saying, do this and do that, I go right back to what? Just being an invisible father. But when her role and responsibility is constantly, checking in so that I can look in that mirror as a resource to locate my strengths and to say, here is what I'm doing. I would like to do this as a vision, not as a goal, as a vision. We come closer to those other pieces, regardless of what they are. as a parent. The time and attention. It is the easiest and most difficult one. Time and attention. Because everybody's busy. We're busy. I like to say, busy doing what? Or what I often tell the teenagers in my life, you're busy doing nothing. So if we can tell ourselves that, I tell myself often, I literally was busy all day Saturday, busy doing nothing. And if I say I'm going to take 2 hours of being busy doing nothing and spend them with these two 15-year-olds, that's the cure. That's the cure. Because it's just as much work for me to resource and sit with them and do something that I find immensely boring, but they don't sense it as I'm bored, opposed to me giving them 2 hours over time to do things on their own. And then if trouble happens, now I've got to spend more than 2 hours, trying to correct it. So the time and attention is time after time, Noah, it proves to be the best one. And it proves to be the most difficult one to get us to show up.
Thank you. That definitely answered the question. And I like how you refrain, because I said trait, and trait, like you said, is it puts somebody in a box, but a style is more malleable and it can shift and it can change. And with the resources, with that support, the mirror allows for that. So thank you for that, Sean.
No, definitely. Because we don't want them to experience, you are this, so Noah, you're a parent, and this is who you are, this as a parent. You are invisible as a father, opposed to you are Noah, you are a parent, you are all these things. Right now, you're showing up as uninvolved or invisible to your child or children, but it doesn't have to be that way always. It's fluid, it's not static, which is really why it's a style that can change.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia put something in the chat, but it came right to me. Patricia said, right, the best gift you can give a child is your time, love, and attention.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dara, did you unmute? You wanted to say something?
No, I'm good. Well, yeah, I'm good.
Okay. I thought I saw you unmute. That's why I called it.
No, well, actually, okay. So when you were explaining about this, Dad, it made me think about, like, does that child experience love from that dad even with the you do you? I feel like they still can, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It just was making me think a lot, like, okay, that's a wondering that I had.
Right. So I think it's important to know that when we think of these styles, they're very Western, meaning for those of us who are born and raised in these United States and who kind of move through time and space in this way that says, this is how we live and exist in this country, compared to non-Western ways of learning, growing, and being with a child or children that can be fundamentally different to a lot of these things that we ascribe to. So if you went to a reservation and saw how, some of those children were being reared in community, you may see some things that, if you work for DHS or the Family Justice Center, you may say, oh, this is awful. But to that community, it's appropriate. It's a demonstration of love. It's cultural. It's generational. And I say those things are just and more than okay. So I think what you're calling is that deeper way of, we all don't see things the same way. And what I'm presenting here isn't through a deeper cultural lens. We would need more time to then unpack this through how folk are reared differently. But this is really saying, for those of us who are here and subscribe to this as a way to kind of learn, grow, and be, these are the populations that we've extrapolated this from.
Mm-hmm.
Great
Thanks,
question.
Sean.
No, great question. Thank you. And our fourth style here, before we spend some time in breakout rooms, and I'm trusting, Noah, that everyone that has their camera off is really still here, and that when we go into the breakout rooms, this is the part of Zoom that makes me nervous, Noah. And I say that because I think for me, it's an issue of equity. If I push folk into a breakout space and then one person cuts their camera on and they're ready to participate and they're looking at black screens, it can change the whole experience for a person. So if anybody is out there in Zoom land, that's, the 36 people that are on this call, we're about to go into a Zoom room, breakout space. And I would say, as much as possible, when we go into the breakout space, I'm okay with your cameras being off now because I'm looking here and you all over here. But when you go into that space, please, please, please cut your cameras on, because it increases the equity so that people are talking to another person and not a black screen. Okay. So the jellyfish fathers are what we call indulgent fathers or permissive fathers. These are the fathers that let their children do whatever they want. These fathers don't offer a lot of guidance or even direction. Listen to this one, Noah. These fathers are more like friends than fathers. Their discipline style tends to be the opposite of being strict, right? They oftentimes have limited or no rules at all for their child or children. And they, similar to that other style, they mostly let children figure problems out on their own. Here's the difference. Their communication is open, and these fathers let children decide for themselves rather than giving them direction. If my father had let me decide for myself a lot of times, things would be a lot different. And I don't mean for the better, Noah. I would have made some horrible, horrible decisions. Here's the difference. Fathers in this category of jellyfish style, they actually tend to be warm and nurturing, Noah. And their expectations for their child or children typically are minimal or not set by these fathers at all. So it's a mix. Someone had I think Carlisle put the word mix in earlier. Here, these fathers really have this mix. So according to the research, children who've been parented by these styles of fathers, look at that impact on the child: early substance abuse use, behavioral misconduct, and impulsivity. I can't wait. I need to have it now. Can't delay gratification. I need to have it now. I need to have it now. And unfortunately, some of you may be working with fathers who seem to be really impulsive. They didn't just wake up yesterday and they became impulsive. They brought that from childhood. The impulsivity that you experience with them, that I guarantee you can track back to your childhood. This one, Noah, reminds me of wait a minute, I just lost my train of thought. The impulsivity around the helicopter parent. That's what it is. It was the next one that I was trying to say before I clicked, which is a new type of parent. These are the parents who pay extremely close attention to their child's experiences, their child's problems. And this happens particularly at educational institutions. They respond as if it's happening to them. Right. They're named helicopter fathers because they hover. They hover overhead, right? They oversee every aspect of their child's life constantly. Here's what you need to know. Fathers who are helicopter fathers is showing that these children have an increased rate of depression early and high anxiety levels in childhood. High anxiety levels in childhood. That's serious, Noah. That's serious.
Are these the fathers who are yelling at coaches and yelling at games and making their kids practice all day, and like in terms of sports?
I see you've been around them, Noah. Yep. That's them. All right. So we gave you a quick and dirty version of some styles of fathers that, you may be spending time in space with. You may be aware of it. You may be unaware of it. Now let's take a look at some breakout spaces, Noah. This is when we're gonna go into the breakout spaces.
Dara's creating them. How many folks would you like per room?
3 people in the room, Dara. No more than 3.
Okay.
3-ish.
Yeah. How many minutes?
3 people, let's give them a minimum of 8 to 10 minutes. You can pick, Dara. No less
Okay.
than 8, no more than 10. So the first question you're all going to share in breakout room number 1 is, what did you notice about yourself when completing that fathering style inventory on that father you picked? What did you notice about yourself? So share that out. And then when we come back, we'll hear from some folk. And remember, when we go into the breakout spaces, that's when you will cut your cameras on. All right, Dara.
We still have a few folks who haven't joined. I'm gonna move some folks who haven't joined into the same room.
Okay.
I'm gonna move. Oh well. I'm gonna move Anthony into a room with other folks because he's in there by himself.
By itself?
Yeah, I'm gonna move him to 3. And I'm gonna move.
Adriana's by herself too.
Okay, let's see.
Adriana's in room 5.
Hi,
I'm just gonna
sorry.
move it.
I went into a room with someone that is not really active, like their camera is off, they're not responding.
Okay,
Can I
let's
join
put
another
Cammy in
group?
6. We're gonna put you in 6.
Thank
Cam.
you.
Janice, Nison, Bridget, Sun, Patricia, Tashina, Joanne, are you all available to participate at this time?
I had to step out, but I'm back here, back in.
Great. We are gonna have to switch rooms for you. One moment.
We can put her in 3.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick Adriana in room 1.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, she's
Okay.
back with nobody. Oops. Okay, Eric, where we gonna put Eric at? Let's put Eric.
All right.
Thanks.
It looks like everybody's back, Dara.
Yep, got 26 folks here. Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you all for staying. I know how I honor, even as a facilitator, how difficult it can be to sometimes go into breakout spaces and you lose people during the breakout. So I appreciate and respect that you all stayed here. I've been guilty on a few Zooms when they pushed me in a breakout room. I left the session. So thank you all. I sincerely appreciate it. So, all right, let's hear from a few folks who want to unmute and share with us what you all shared. You can speak for the whole group, maybe you speak for yourself in your breakout room about what you noticed about yourself when you were completing that fathering style inventory. You can
And I
just
muted folks, so come off of mute if you were unmute. If you were already unmuted, my apologies. I just wanted to make sure.
Samuel.
Yes. I had the pleasure of being in a breakout room with a gentleman that was we're exact age and we're born
Okay.
in the same era, mid 50s and our parenting, and what I recognize is the invisible dad,
Okay.
is like I come up with the invisible dad.
Right.
And much as I hate to admit it, I turned out to be an invisible dad,
Okay.
and like I was discussing, I have like 9 grandkids,
Okay.
and being a father, as far as like, the being the best grandparent I could be, I learned from my son's fathering skills.
Okay.
Hard as that, I don't, because my son's like 47. So
Right.
like we really became friends when we were 25, when he was 25.
Okay.
And we've been really good friends. And now I'm dad again, not dude, and so I learned all my fathering skills through him. And he's not an invisible father. And so I've learned to recognize, it seems like, I don't know, is that generational thing? That my dad was a invisible dad, and I turned out to be one.
Well, we definitely well, first of all, thank you for that.
Yeah,
A deep and honest share, Samuel. We do know that many of us do two things similar in the unconscious state. Most of us parent the way we were parented,
right,
and most of us teach the way we were taught. So
right,
that unlearning that I was speaking about earlier with the invisible dads, kind of acknowledging I don't want to parent how I was parented, but not put anything in the gap. In many respects, you were supposed to parent the way you were parented, where it wasn't questioned that you learn it from the person who parented who parented you. Um, I think more the current, or I'm thinking in the last 15 years, which isn't a long time, research is really moving towards those younger folk and how they're deciding to parent around their lived experiences being different, around that access to technology, around many younger uh, uh, parents don't necessarily live in close proximity to their parents. So young children are all not being raised within the same community as their grandparents. All of those things affect how we decide to parent. Um, so styles are changing because of how people are actually living their lives. That affects parenting also. So I think what you're saying around that invisible piece, uh, definitely true then, definitely true now. I think where it came from is different. I think that's generationally and kind of environmentally what's happening in our society, that it comes from a different place. I don't think it's still coming from the same place. So I think if you talk to someone who was 25 and an invisible parent, and if you talk to his father, if he was, let's say, 50 or 55, um, and that person was an invisible parent, if you ask them both in silo um, to kind of talk about their style and they landed there, they wouldn't talk about it coming from the same place at all. I think that's fundamentally um, what's shifted. And so I think the work is still getting people, the younger folk, who are saying consciously, I'm okay with being this way, to not tell themselves they're okay with being that.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Awesome share.
Thank-
All right. Who wants to follow Sam?
Eric, were you coming off of mute? I know I muted everyone. I didn't know if you were coming back off of mute. And no worries if you weren't. No worries if you weren't.
All right. Nobody else wants to share what you shared or someone else shared in your breakout space? Around what did you notice when completing it? And we asked that question because what we want service providers to do is so often we jump into the work of fatherhood, or we see it through this very binary space. And oftentimes that binary space is through the work of working with mothers, right? And you know, if you've worked with Kevin, you've probably heard him say this. I don't have a slide in this deck, but oftentimes, if we're working primarily with mothers, and then we see fathers through a very narrow space, historically, mothers and grandmothers and aunties, and tias and abuelitas have been gatekeepers. So even when we think about fathering and styles, how do we access those mothers, those females, so they can become gateways instead of gatekeepers to fathers? Because that's some, you know, we're not going deep into that here, but I want you all to hold that space around this question is, what did you notice about yourself? Because sometimes those are the things we bring into that person we held in mind around who we're working with. And it becomes very subjective and not objective. And another part of this question was designed to get you to unearth what bias are we bringing into the work of working with fathers? You know, and bias, we can have positivity biases and we can have negativity biases in terms of working with fathers. So my positivity bias in working with fathers, if the dad really talks and he communicates a lot, I get lost in it. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm all excited. And I miss the fact that it was all talk and no action. So that's a positivity bias that I have, that oftentimes when I'm in those spaces, I've got to pay attention to, oh, he's talking a lot, he's sharing a lot, and how I'm leaning in. Then I miss to ask the right clarifying question because it's a positivity bias. The same way I have negativity biases. I'm not going to tell them all because I'm going to tell y'all all my business, but we all have them when we're working with dads. So part of this work was to say, what ushers to the front that's about me and not about him? And how am I bringing that into the space that I share with him? If it's a massive space or if it's a teeny tiny space, like if I'm seeing it through the work that I do with his partner or the mom, what is it that I'm bringing in addition to what they're presenting? What am I bringing around how I've placed this father in this style? And what does that mean for me? Or have I afforded him the flexibility, as Noah said earlier, to be fluid? And then now that I have this information around his style, what can I do to help and resource to hold that mirror up? So if we took nothing else away from it, let's add that to it as a careful consideration of working with dads in those spaces, regardless of how limited and how small or how large. Because I know some of you work directly with fathers and it's all the work you do. You know, some of you see the fathers in passing, you see the dads in passing, or the dads are a side work to what you do with another parent or the mother, or if you're, you know, doing some work specifically with children. And oftentimes the work that we're doing with children, the work is with the mother, right? The female parent, and not with the male parent. So how do we open ourselves up to a greater capacity? Should we move to the next question, Kevin? I mean, Noah?
Yes.
Noah's starting to look like Kevin, Dara. What is going on? So here's our next question that I want us to unpack. What aspects of your parenting styles did you learn from your parent? What aspects of your parenting styles? And there's a rationale to this. So Dara, we're only gonna give them 5 minutes for this one, just 5 minutes. So this one is that they know each other already. We can keep them in the same breakout rooms. So let's push them in for just a quick 5 minutes, and then we'll talk about where this question comes from.
I'm gonna move Eric to 1 because he's by himself.
Okay.
How can I join one?
I'm gonna move you now,
Oh,
Joanne.
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Move you to 9. Okay.
Depending on my dad had a health condition that made it hard for him to be always the dad he wanted to be.
Okay.
So he would vacillate between literally being like he was very strict when he
Mhm.
was in a good mood. Like when he was in a good mood, he was like, right, like you're gonna do this and this, and still attentive and all and loving and everything. But when he was not feeling well, he was just completely not present. If he wasn't feeling good, he was like an invisible dad. Like, is that what you want to do? Good, fine, go ahead. But then when he felt better, he would return to those decisions and be like, you shouldn't have did that, you shouldn't have did that. And we would be like, but you said it was very confusing.
Yeah.
But we also knew like when we would be like taking advantage, basically. We knew like we could ask for certain things and get certain like responses when he wasn't feeling well. And then when he would feel well, we knew there was things that we couldn't ask for or do. But it was very interesting.
Yeah. My dad was a hammer my whole life. And he was old, like I said, he was older and he was sick, but for me, he was a hammer. So I just saw this big, strong man. I'm gonna mute everyone again. If you want to speak, please come off of mute.
All right. Welcome back, everyone.
I muted you, Sean. I'm sorry. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Noah. I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Yeah, my apologies.
I was saying, welcome back, everyone. Would love to hear from maybe 2 folk around. And I forgot to tell you all, and thanks to Patricia, you could answer this question from the perspective of being an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, around your style. If you aren't a parent. So let's ask this, and then maybe we can have 1 or 2 people unmute. When you think of actually working with parents or fathers, and I'm putting both out there, if the majority of the folk you work with are mothers and not fathers, when you think of working with parents, how much of your own stuff surfaces around what you learned from your parents? Do you recognize it when it's surfacing? Is it showing up? If you're in the case consultation meeting, if you're, looking for a parent, if you're leading a parent session, if you're on the phone call or on the Zoom, whatever the work is, if you're searching for like that missing, parent and it's your work to find them in community, if they're in some type of program, whatever it is. When you're working with them, how often do you recognize regarding the parenting piece, stuff that you were told or that was modeled for you? What shows up? Like what aspects of that show up for you in the work that you are conscious of? Or maybe as you're thinking about it, what aspects are you unconscious of?
Joanne, you have your hand raised?
Yep. Go ahead, Joanne. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So I think a lot of times culture is a huge part of that. As a Hispanic woman, I when I hear stories of my clients or when I reference them or direct them to resources. I think that culture is huge. We were just discussing this yesterday about how a lot of times in Hispanic culture, we rely on the school system to teach our children certain things versus the parent teaching them, making them aware of XYZ. So I think that a lot of times there's that lack of communication because a lot of topics are taboo. And so we don't want to discuss it with our children. We just wait for the school to do it. So I think that culture is a huge part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Culture is a huge, huge part. Go ahead, Jose.
Yes, let me put my camera. Hi everyone. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to share. Just mainly that when with this second question, it was a little hard for me because of course I was not raised physically, of course, with my father. Because
Okay.
I let my mom let my father with my brothers and sisters when I was about 4 years old or 5 years old, something like that.
Mhm.
So, but getting to know him a little bit, already older, I realized that hey, I do have some things that some traits, I guess, that that makes me now who I am. And at least that's what I'm getting interested in. Not parenting style because I never saw him parenting me, but then but just the experience of not being with my father, and not having a father role. My father, enough role models in terms of males when as I was growing up, but now in my job, what I do, yes, I can relate a lot to. That's what something that I find out, and have learned a lot over many years in terms of fathers, mothers also, but especially fathers that have gone through the experience where they were not raised by their fathers. They have to, mature on their own and survive and be independent, like you mentioned that in the previously. But that's that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Mhm. No, so Jose, you bring up this really, and these are all like crucial components to any work that we're doing with fathers. Because for many folk in this country, regardless of how we all ended up here, in this country, I wish I had this slide ready. No, I forget what presentation this is. I will grab it real quick. But this notion of growing up without the father in the home, we have to realize that that was a structural component that was embedded into this country that largely told women and children, mainly of color or poor white women and children, that if you don't have a husband and don't have a male partner, then the government will help you. So what we see when Jose was talking, what we see that shows up in the late 40s, in early 50s, was children who had mothers and fathers in the home was really moving along like this. And in the late 40s, early 50s, when we instituted welfare and they put demands on people that said, we will give you this if he doesn't exist, you see this uptick with males not being in the home. So again, remember I told you about the parenting and the education piece of how we did this ping pong with parents. There are systems that we all ascribe to because none of us were alive when they were enacted. They kind of just got passed on. So if you don't do the back work, you don't understand where they came from. So a lot of the stuff that we deal with specifically with fathers not being in the home is this thing we call co-parenting now. It actually is a structural component to how we exist. It really is. And the data is there. This isn't Sean making it up, that there's a clear differentiation when our government told women that if they did that, they would help them. And you see this big gap between it around women being single mothers, but not by choice. That's the part I want everybody to walk away with. Not by choice. And I know Noah and Dara, I know it is in one of the sessions that we recorded. I just don't remember which one it was. No, it was a recorded session, and that was literally the whole session around engaged fathers, non-engaged fathers, and they primarily only the research looked at white fathers, Black fathers, and Latino fathers. I don't think Asian fathers were a part of it, and around their engagement from children 5 and under, and then children 6 to 18, and how engaged the fathers were. And a part of that, we looked at this notion of mothers raising children on their own, and when did fathers begin to leave the homes? It parallels directly with welfare state. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, like, when you talk about the government and an involvement in raising kids, or helping to raise kids financially or structurally, like nowadays, kids can show up to school, elementary school, at 7:30 to get breakfast and stay till 6 p.m. in an after school program.
Right. No.
Like back in the day, that wasn't a reality. And I'm not saying it wasn't a necessity, or it is a necessity, but I'm saying that wasn't a reality. These children now are in or at a school system, within a school system, for nearly 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And on top of families being multi-generational in the homes, everyone's working and things. So it's a lot of different dynamics now that, like, as you spoke, Bashan, like that we didn't necessarily agree upon or set up, but they were in the works, and now they're just intricate in our lives.
Definitely. No, it's so true that most children now spend most of their waking hours outside of their homes. And I'm speaking specifically children under the age of 6. That time frame. So as you get a little bit older, you get more freedom because you can go home by yourself. You can stick the key in the door. But children 6 and under, if they have working parents, they spend most of their waking hours with people who are not their parents. So just imagine if my parent has to work and they drop me off at a preschool site at 6:15 a.m., 6:15 in the morning, and they pick me back up at 6 p.m. We drive 35 minutes to get home. It's now about 6:40. They cook dinner. We eat dinner, almost 8 o'clock. If they're on their schedule, another hour, we're going to sleep. I'm really only interfacing with my parents on the weekend. Like, so when you think of, when you were talking, you made me think of the fatherhood research that said it is not the quantity of interaction, but it's the quality of interaction with the father. And that research was when they started tracking fathers who were not living with their children in a home. And it was, well, if I don't live with my child, how effective can I be? And, the research says actually fathers who don't live with their children are highly effective if they understand the quality of the interaction, not the quantity. So if you think of the invisible father, I live with my children, but I don't do anything. So if you're counting the number of days and hours that I'm with them, that'll be really high. But if you juxtapose that with the quality of interaction, we might observe 0 compared to a father who say, I pick my children up on Friday and I keep them till Sunday afternoon. And when I'm with them the whole time, we're engaged, we're interacting. I don't have the number of days with them or hours in terms of that, but my interaction quality is fundamentally higher. And back to something Jose and Samuel said, I had this thought around, we actually find that many grandfathers or older fathers who weren't as effective when they were younger, somehow as they get older, they're starting to resource. So many fathers would say, they're great with my kids. He didn't do much for me, but he's great with my kids as a grandparent. So we actually find that with older generations, as fathers are becoming grandfathers or just becoming older, that they go back and are able, when they can, to close those ruptures in the parent-child relationship. And you'll hear their children or them saying, we didn't, but now we do have an effective relationship. So it's almost as if when their child became an adult, they've been able to then capture, not all the times, but sometimes capture and close those ruptures to develop a new kind of parent-child relationship in adulthood that they didn't have when their child or children were children. We see a lot of that in terms of fatherhood data.
That's encouraging.
I just wanted to add real quick, something that you mentioned, Noah, about the system, and also Sean about the what is that, the time, the parents. When I immigrated here, I was and to stay here permanently. I was 15 years old, and when I remember my mom used to go to work um, much earlier than when I started school. I started school, my sisters and brothers. So for us, I don't remember ever having a breakfast during the week with my mom. Don't remember. So so one thing that I was looking forward is just getting to school so I can eat, and thinking about the system, the time, and mom had to work. So yeah, I'm just thinking about those things, relating to what you just said, no, Sean.
I found it, Noah. Dara.
Thank you, Jose. There we go.
Thank
Yeah.
Definitely, Jose. So this was census data, it's 2009. But if you look at that purple line that's at the top, those are mother-only homes. The red line is no parent, and the green line is father-only. And then they started collecting this data in 1880. In my chart, which I clearly need to update, Noah, because the last time I looked at the census data was 2009. I'm going to blame it on COVID. But I think this tells us a compelling story. If you look at the 50s and the 60s, when those lines really begin to no longer run parallel, that's exactly when that experiment turned into a larger scale experiment in the mother-only homes, the purple line going up really high. That parallels with welfare. Yeah, that parallels with welfare. Yeah, I just wanted to show that one, Noah.
No, thank you. Thank you. Because I think that when we talk about systems and they're being broken, we often also hear now like they're not broken, they're working the way they're supposed to be.
Right.
And the data shows the intentionality behind fracturing the homes and what it does to outcomes for families, children, communities as a whole.
That's right. That's right. Which is why I was like, when he was talking, I was like, I have to find this slide. So I was trying to click it somewhere in here. That to me, that says, whoa. So even the work when I was doing specific fatherhood work in San Francisco City and County, I had no idea that the frame and the structure and the funding behind my program was all framed that fathers were bad. Like, I think it's important for me to say that I was doing the work, but had no idea that the frame and the impetus was fathers are up to no good, they're bad, and they don't want to pay their child support, and let's go get them. And after we get them, if they don't do what we say, let's arrest them. And then when that became ever present to me, it was like, there has to be a better way. And what I found was when you would hear their stories and their narratives, it was this large chasm between what we were charged with doing, what they understood, what they were told, and just barriers to them becoming actively engaged fathers that we can't get into right now. So I want to close with that around, regardless of what we were told, I think there's a way to kind of reconsider our role and responsibility, and regardless of our role, how we're engaging fathers. And are we engaging them through a deficit-based negative lens, or are we able to kind of reconsider and go back to the table and say, we've got to stop considering fathers as an afterthought. until we stop considering fathers as an afterthought, and have programs that support parents and families instead of programs like WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, that literally says a man should not be caring for his child or children. So until we contend with just the name and the language of things that still exist, it becomes really, really hard, which is why this work exists, to see fathers through a positive, productive lens, and that we can help them become agents of their own change. So it's 1 minute after the hour. Noah.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. We have the survey in the chat. Please complete the survey. We'd love to hear your feedback regarding today's training. Thank you for being here today. I hope you got everything you needed out of today. Thank you, Sean, for your amazing presentation, your tone, your perspective, and your experience on this. Again, everyone, happy Friday. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. You will receive the slide deck. We'll send it out to Brenda. You will be receiving that next week, most likely. And again, please complete the survey. Please complete the survey.
Thank you.